أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء وخضع لها كل شيء وذل لها كل شيء، وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء، وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء، وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء، وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء، وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء، وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء، وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء، وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء. يا نور يا قدوس، يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تهتك العصم، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقم، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعم، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء، اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها، اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك وأستشفع بك إلى نفسك، وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من قربك، وأن توزعني شكرك، وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا قانعا، وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا. اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته، وعظم فيما عندك رغبته، اللهم عظم سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكرك وظهر أمرك وغلب قهرك وجرت قدرتك، ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوبي غافرا ولا لقبائحي ساترا. ولا لشيء من عملي القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك ظلمت نفسي وتجرأت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي كم من قبيح سترته وكم من فادح من البلاء أقلته وكم من عثار وقيته وكم من مكروه دفعته وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشرته. اللهم عظم بلائي وأفرط بي سوء حالي وقصرت بي أعمالي وقعدت بي أغلالي وحبسني عن نفعي بعد أملي وخدعتني الدنيا بغرورها ونفسي بجنايتها ومطالي يا سيدي فأسألك بعزتك ألا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي ولا تفضحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي. وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأمور رؤوفا وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رؤوفا وعلي في جميع الأمور عطوفا. إلهي وربي من لي غيرك أسأله كشف ضري والنظر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي ولم أحترس فيه من تزيين عدوي فغرني بما أهوى وأسعده على ذلك القضاء فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعض حدودك وخالفت بعض أوامرك فلك الحمد علي في جميع ذلك ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاؤك وألزمني حكمك وبلاؤك. وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا مستغفرا منيبا مقرا مذعنا معترفا لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني، ولا مفزعا أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في سعة رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري وارحم شدة ضري وفكني من شدي وثاقي. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني ورقة جلدي ودقة عظمي. يا من بدأ خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي، هبني لابتداء كرمك وسالف برك بي. يا إلهي وسيدي وربي، أتراك معذبي من نارك بعد توحيدك وبعد من طوى عليه قلبي من معرفتك ولهجا به لساني من ذكرك واعتقده ضميري من حبك وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك. هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضيع من ربيته أو تبعد من أدنيته أو تشرد من آويته أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمته. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي، أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدة وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقا وبشكرك مادحا وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققا وعلى ضمائر حوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة وعلى جوارح سعت إلى أوطان تعبدك طائعة وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنة. ما هكذا الظن بك ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم. يا ربي وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها، على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه قليل مكثوه يسير بقاؤه قصير مدته. فكيف احتمالي لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه ولا يخفف عن أهله، لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك، وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض. يا سيدي، فكيف بي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين. يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي، لأي الأمور إليك أشكو، ولما منها أضج وأبكي، لأليم العذاب وشدته أم لطول البلاء ومدته؟ فلئن صيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك، وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك، وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك، فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي. صبرت على عذابك، فكيف أصبر على فراقك؟ وهبني صبرت على حر نارك، فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك؟ أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجائي عفوك؟ فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا، لئن تركتني ناطقا لأضجن إليك بين أهلها ضجيج الآملين، ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين، ولأبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين، ولأنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين، يا غاية آمال العارفين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين، ويا إله العالمين. أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفته، وذاق طعم عذابها بمعصيته، وحبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرته، وهو يضج إليك ضجيج مؤمل لرحمتك، ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك، ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك يا مولاي. فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك؟ أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يأمل فضلك ورحمتك؟ أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يأمل فضلك ورحمتك؟ أم كيف يحرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه؟ أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفه؟ أم كيف يتقلقل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقه؟ أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا ربه؟ أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتقه منها فتتركه فيها؟ هيهات، ما ذلك الظن بك ولا المعروف من فضلك، ولا مشبه لما عاملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك، فباليقين أقطع لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب جاحديك، وقضيت به من إخلاد معانديك، لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما، وما كان لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما، لكنك تقدست أسماؤك أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين، وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين، وأن تجل ثناؤك قلت مبتدئا، وتطولت بالإنعام متكرما، أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون. إلهي وسيدي، فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها، وبالقضية التي حتمتها وحكمتها، وغلبت من عليه أجريتها، أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته، وكل ذنب أذنبته، وكل قبيح أسررته، وكل جهل عملته، كتمته أو أعلنته، أخفيته أو أظهرته، وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني، وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جوارحي، وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم، والشاهد لما خفي عنهم، وبرحمتك أخفيته، وبفضلك سترته، وأن توفر حظي من كل خير أنزلته، أو إحسان فضلته، أو بر نشرته، أو رزق بسطته، أو ذنب تغفره، أو خطأ تستره، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك رقي، يا من بيده ناصيتي، يا عليما بضري ومسكنتي، يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، أسألك بحقك وقدسك وأعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي من الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورة، وبخدمتك موصولا، وأعمالي عندك مقبولة، حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا، وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا. يا سيدي يا من عليه معولي، يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، قو على خدمتك جوارحي، واشدد على العزيمة جوانحي، وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك حتى أسرح إليك في ميادين السابقين وأسرع إليك في البارزين وأشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين وأخافك مخافة الموقنين وأجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين. اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فأرده ومن كادني فكده واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك وأقربهم منزلة منك وأخصهم زلفة لديك. أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد.
رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة.
سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن عليًا ولي الله أشهد أن عليًا بالحق حجة الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله. وصلى الله على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر الله أكبر. جل جلاله وربه. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. أشهد أن مولانا عليا حجة الله صلوات الله وسلامه عليه. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح. حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أنزلناه في ليلة القدر وما أدراك ما ليلة القدر. ليلة القدر خير من 1000 شهر. تنزل الملائكة والروح فيها بإذن ربهم من كل أمر. سلام هي حتى مطلع الفجر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بحول الله. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. يا من له الدنيا والآخرة ارحم من ليس له الدنيا والآخرة. الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إني أسألك موجبات رحمتك وعزائم مغفرتك والنجاة من النار ومن كل بلية والفوز بالجنة والرضوان في دار السلام وجوار نبيك محمد عليه وآله السلام. اللهم ما بنا من نعمة فمنك لا إله إلا أنت. أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.
الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم أشهد أن مولانا عليا حجة الله صلوات الله وسلامه عليه. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أنزلناه في ليلة القدر وما أدراك ما ليلة القدر ليلة القدر خير من 1000 شهر. تنزل الملائكة والروح فيها بإذن ربهم من كل أمر سلام هي حتى مطلع الفجر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا اغفر لي ولوالدي وللمؤمنين يوم يقوم الحساب. رب ارحمهما كما ربياني صغيرا. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد بحول الله. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر بحول الله. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم ارزقني في الدنيا زيارة الحسين وفي الآخرة شفاعة الحسين.
الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إنه ليس لي علم بموضع رزقي وإنما أطلبه بخطرات تخطر على قلبي فأجول في طلبه البلدان فأنا فيما أنا طالب كالحيران لا أدري أفي سهل أم في جبل أم في أرض أم في السماء أم في بر أم في بحر وعلى يدي من ومن قبل من وقد علمت أن علمه عندك وأسبابه بيدك وأنت الذي تقسمه بلطفك وتسببه برحمتك. اللهم فصل على محمد وآله واجعل يا رب رزقك لي واسعا ومثلبه سهلا ومأخذه قريبا ولا تعنني بطلب ما لم تقدر لي فيه رزقا فإنك غني عن عذابي وأنا فقير إلى رحمتك. فصل على محمد وآله وجد على عبدك بفضلك إنك ذو فضل عظيم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغني عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كما أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة وأحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالأرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مركدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم أن لا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تاكلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لتمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويهق القول على الكافرين ولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم ير الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون صدق الله العلي العظيم رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Sayyid Shabbir Kirmani, respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah Fatiha is requested for the Salih Sawab of the Marhumeen listed on the screen and for all Marhumeen. Al-Fatiha. Aman Yujibu is requested for the names listed on the screen and for all those who need here and elsewhere. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه يكشف السوء أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه يكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه يكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه يكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه يكشف السوء. Weekend Islamic School 2021-2022. The enrollment for 2021-2022 Madrasa year at Masjid Hayy is now open. This includes both the children's program, pre-K to grade 12 age 4+, and the adult learning program. Deadline to register is July 11th, and the first day of classes will be Saturday, August 28th. Jummah Niyaz Fund. Due to the increase in attendance for Salat al-Jum'ah, the Jummah Niyaz Fund is now open to additional sponsors who wish to contribute. Please contact Brother Murtaza Kareem or Sister Batul Mukhi at the numbers on the screen to make a one-time or ongoing sponsorship. Donations can also be made online or by placing cash or checks in the box labeled Niyaz Fund located in the ladies and gents side. May Allah reward all those who contribute towards this fund. At this time, I would like to invite Sayyid Shabbir Kirmani to come recite tonight's majlis with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
If you could please recite the Surah Al-Fatiha for the dearly departed souls of Marhumeen, Asghar Haji and Muhammad Fida Hussain Kaki. Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Maliki yawm ad-din. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim. Sirata alladhina an'amta alayhim. Ghayril maghdubi alayhim wa lad-dallin. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فوضوا أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ونعم المولى ونعم النصير والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا اللهم صل على محمد وقل رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتاب الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وقضى ربك ألا تعبدوا إلا إياه وبالوالدين إحسانا صدق الله العلي العظيم زينوا مجالسكم بالصلوات على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على My respected elders, brothers and sisters in Iman, Salamun alaykum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Question: how important is family? Keep that question in the back of your mind, inshallah, we shall return to it. If you recall, we had mentioned not too long ago, in fact, for those of you who were in the Jum'ah Salah, will recall I alluded to this. We have numerous studies that look at this phenomenon in terms of how do we establish our health. And one dimension of health is that which is known as medical sociology. That is, that does not look at just the medicine that you and I take. It does not just look at, for example, the food that you and I eat. It does not just look at, for example, our habits, but rather it looks at our sociology. That is, how is society around us? And how is that society around us impacting our health, either positively or negatively? In fact, I remember I was speaking to my dear friend afterwards, and he was telling me that the model is even in some cases even more robust, looking at the biopsychosocial dimensions, meaning 3 dimensions: the medical aspect, the psychological aspect, as well as the sociological aspect. All of these coming together to impact the health. And if you recall the Rossetto effect and other effects, I came to the conclusion, and I shared with you, that we found that there are certain things that can actually help you live longer, and there are certain things that can actually retract from your health. What are those things that can help you live longer? Cutting right to the chase. Cutting right to the chase, one of those things that has been found to actually help you live longer is having strong relationships. Relationships with your father, relationships with your mother, relationships with your spouse, relationships with your siblings, relationships that you can rely on when you have money, when you don't have money, when you are famous, when you're not famous, when people know you, when people don't know you. In every circumstance, if you have, whether through thick or through thin, as the saying goes, if you have certain people who you can rely on and you have a relationship with those individuals, that will help you in terms of your well-being. Oftentimes in our world, with the need in increasing demands of our modern world, in terms of work, in terms of timing, in terms of so many things that are clinging for our attention, we sometimes miss the main elements of life. And one of those main elements of life is family and family relations. We sometimes make the problem even more challenging. How do we make it even more challenging? We make it oftentimes more challenging by oftentimes causing rifts and having fights and arguments within our own loved ones and our own families. Sometimes siblings don't speak to each other. Sometimes parents and children don't speak to one another. Sometimes these things happen. In a life that is already so short, in a life where mortality is right in front of us, in a life where things are going, we're all going in the same direction, which is towards the grave, we still somehow find time to bicker and find arguments. In the brief moments that we have together, I want to look at a few things. Number one, what are the barakat and the rahmat that one gets in their life with having a good relationship in terms of Sila Rahmi with their loved ones, as well as with their parents, especially those family members? How is it that you and I get mercy in this life and in the hereafter through these relationships? What are benefits that we get in this world? Is it possible that God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God Almighty gives us benefits in this life while we are alive? And how do we get those benefits? What are those benefits? I then want to look at what are some of the narrations that have come to us with respect to why this particular night, Thursday night, is so important. And what is it that we can actually do for our dearly departed in these nights in particular. And finally, I want to remind our hearts how important is that connection to the Ahlul Bayt, and what is it that you and I can do to make sure that on the Day of Judgment, perhaps we are in a state where we are smiling as opposed to any other state. This is our agenda for the brief moments that we have together. Wherever you are, here in Florida or across the globe, wherever you're hearing my voice, from the bottom of your heart, send a salawat on Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. At the first level, what are the benefits of understanding the importance of family, number one, and having strong family relationships in this dunya, in this world, beyond anything else? At the first level, if you come to the ancient Greek philosophers, whether it was Plato or Aristotle, these individuals, and I start with this by saying that many people say, oh, this is just Islam, this is just religion. No, outside of the fold, I want to give you something that you can take to your neighbor, your colleague at work, your classmate at school, in terms of what is the importance of family, and in particular the parents who are the nucleus of the family. According to Aristotle, the first debt that a man must pay is to his parents. Why? Because the individual would not exist had it not been for the parents. So you have to repay them for the gift of life. Of course, you cannot repay them. But even that was understood by the philosophers, that this is a very important element. Number two, one must go hungry before themselves before they see their parents get hungry. This is what the philosophers came forward and said. They must make sure that their parents have clothes before they have clothes. They must make sure that their parents have shelter before they have shelter. I have not gone into Islam yet. This was something that was understood. You go to Hinduism. In Hinduism, there's a lot of reverence and respect for parents. Many of you may have studied and learned this as well. Every major religion you will find this theme. In Judaism, in Christianity, and of course in indeed Islam. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say in the Quran with respect to the parents especially, which are the nucleus of the family? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, what I recited at the beginning, the verse that I had the honor of reciting at the beginning, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. What is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying? And we enjoin on you not to associate anyone with Allah and do good to your parents. Ya Allah, why are you saying this in one breath, one after the other? You're saying we enjoin on you not to associate anyone with Allah and do good to your parents. The mufassirin of the Quran, the ones who do the tafsir of the Quran, the ones who do the analysis of the Quran and try to glean the gems from the Quran, they come forward and say, it is as if Allah is saying, do not associate anyone with me, but if I were to allow you to worship anyone else, it would be your parents. That's the level, that's the position. And of course in the ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in other places, He says, وَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمَا أُفٍّ, and do not even say uff to them, which the ulama say, had there been a smaller word or a smaller utterance, Allah would have used that. The idea being, sometimes we forget about these things, and sometimes we forget about the importance of these things. Believe me, there are numerous studies. For example, I've often recommended a book for parents to read, probably not for children, but it's called American Girls. And it's a book by Nancy Jo Sales, where she talks about the difficulties of raising a daughter in American society, for example. What are the challenges faced therein? Or for example, strong mothers, strong sons, strong fathers, strong daughters. And we realize that a relationship between the father and the mother and the children is extremely important if the family is going to be strong in the long run. If there are weak relationships where the children don't feel close to the parents don't feel close to the children, where the children don't feel that they can communicate and talk to their parents, the result will be that that child will look for advice elsewhere. And oftentimes the advice that comes from elsewhere is not the best advice. They may not have the best interest. No one, with certain exceptions, has the interest of the child in mind like the parents. Is it not true? Don't parents look out for the best school for their children, the best place for them to live, the best clothes, whatever they can do with that is in their ability, parents come forward to make sure that they give the best for their children. So if the parents are not advising the children, who's advising the children? Nancy Jo Sales in her book American Girl said the children are advising the parents. The paradigm has shifted today. You and I need to be mindful of this because I mentioned just a moment ago the sociology. Sociology is the study of society. The society around you impacts our health. How long we live. You don't think it impacts other aspects of our lives? Most certainly it does. Nonetheless, coming to the Islamic perspective, what is it that you and I should do? Thursday nights is something that is of the utmost importance. And it is a night where our Marhumeen, the ones who we have lost, our dearly departed, according to the riwayat and the narrations, they come to us and they ask for something. Some gift, some hadiyah, something. And they're not asking for wealth. They're not asking for any of that. Although if you can give a sadaqah on behalf of the Marhumeen, that's wonderful. But just a salah for them, a prayer for them, a remembrance of them, a fatiha for them, a yasin for them. It goes a long way. There are two salahs in particular. There is the salah of the maghfirah of the marhum, and there is the salah of the hadiyah of the marhum. These are two salahs that you and I need to know. Because many times people ask, what can we do for our marhumeen? And the answer has come forward from the Ahlul Bayt. Number one, with respect to the maghfirah, and this comes from the Imam. The Imam himself says, there are at least two prayers that you can do. And the Imam says, I myself, for my parents, I do the salah of the maghfirah, seeking the forgiveness of my parents on Thursday nights. And I do the salah of the hadiyah meaning gift. The hadiyah of my walidain, my parents, I do it every day. In fact, the Imam says we do it twice a day. One in the daytime, one in the night. He says, but if you can do it once, that's even sufficient. Ya Imam, how do we do this salah that you do every day for your parents? He says it's the simplest one. You know how do you do it? You do it like Fajr salah. It doesn't get easier than that. 2 rak'ah, 2 units to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What do you do? First rak'ah Surah Al-Hamd, and second one, for example, Surah Qul Huwallahu Ahad, Surah Tawheed. Second rak'ah, after Surah Fatiha, Surah Kawthar. It doesn't get shorter than this. And afterwards, you raise your hands and you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive your parents. You know what's the barakah of this particular salah? That it's not limited to Thursday nights, you can recite it any time. Number one. Number two, it's not only walidain according to the narrations, it's not just your direct parents. It also includes all those people who are part of Silat al-Rahim. That is your uncles, your aunts, those people who are your womb relatives. They all get encapsulated in that. You see, this goes a long way. There's a riwayah, according to Shaykh Abbas al-Qummi, on Thursday nights in particular, when Maghrib Salah time hits, all the way up until Fajr. On Thursday nights, the parents, the mother and the father, they have the right to visit their children, their loved ones, their family, in the Alimul Arwah, that is, in the realm afterwards. Alim Barzakh or Alim Barhut, for example, and Wadi Salam and Wadi Barhut, these are where the souls go into. I don't have time to discuss where they go in particular, but inshallah, in the state of Barzakh, the parents come to the family. When they come to the family, according to the narrations, the mother and the father come forward and they ask, they come seeking something from their children. A Yasin or a Fatiha or a Salatul Hadiyah or Salatul Maghfirah or something, some gift that will help them in the hereafter. And they start from the night. And they stay, and they stay, and they stay up until Isha time and beyond Isha time. And the night comes. They only have till Fajr time. And when Fajr is about to hit, according to the riwayah, the father is losing hope. He says, let's go. There's nothing we're going to get here. The mother says, maybe there's a few moments left till Fajr. Maybe our child will recite something for us that will benefit us. And when they get nothing, they turn around hopeless. And the mother calls out and she said, had you just recited a Fatiha for me or did a prayer for me, I would have prayed right back for you. You know, the prayer of a mother is one that the rahmah, while one is alive, one cannot enumerate the rahmah in this life. You cannot enumerate it. And even after, according to certain riwayah, even after the death of your parents, you are told to go to their grave to do dua. You may say, how is it possible? How powerful is the dua? You want to know the antidote to your problems in life? If your parents are alive, especially your mother, go ask them. And if they're not, go to their grave to see if you can get assistance. Sheikh Muhammad Ali Tirmidhi. Sheikh Muhammad Ali Tirmidhi was a well-known scholar in Iran. He was from Tirmidh. He was a student at this time. These colleagues, him and his two friends, they wanted to go, and when they wanted to go to Hawza to get higher education in terms of Hawza Ilmiya. Tirmidh is not where necessarily the main Hawza is. Main Hawzas are in Mashhad or Qom or these places. So they're in Tirmidh, they wanted to go. When they wanted to go, the mother said, my child, Muhammad Ali, you are my child, you are my dearest child. Who's going to look after me? Who's going to take care of me? said, my mother, my friends are going to Hawza. I also want to go get higher education in the Hawza, in this Islamic seminary. He said, my son, don't stay with me, please. It was very difficult. He was contemplating, what should I do? Should I stay? Should I go? Should I stay? Should I go? What do I do? He finally came forward and he said, my mother has wanted me to stay and my friends are going. He went to his friends, he said, look, you guys go ahead, maybe I'll catch up with you, maybe I'll join you later, maybe I'll come with you another time. You guys go ahead, continue on to Hawza. He said, very well. He went and sat by the river, Muhammad Ali. It was his name. Later he became known as Sheikh Muhammad Ali Tirmidhi. He went and sat by the lake. When he went and sat by the lake and the river, he was sitting there very depressed. He wanted to learn. He wanted to increase his knowledge and his wisdom. What happened? At that point in time, we're told that an old man came and tapped him on his shoulder. He said, what's going on, young man? What's bothering you? What's going on? He said, I wanted to go to the Islamic seminary. I wanted to learn. I wanted to increase my wisdom. I wanted to increase my insights. But I wasn't able to. I said, why? He said, my friends, they went to the Hawza, but I wasn't able to. He said, why? He said, because my mother, she wants me to stay. He said, what are you worried about? Don't worry, I'll teach you, the elderly man said to him. He said, very well. What are you going to teach me? He said, give me a shot, give me a try, maybe I can teach you something. He said, very well. So they began to study together. He began to learn a few things. He came back the next day. 1 day passed, 2 days passed. The next day he brings wood into his house. Muhammad Ali, he brings wood into his home. His mother sees him very happy. Sometimes the mother only, she wants to see happiness on a child's face. He said, what's going on? He said, I found a teacher. He's teaching me right here in town. I said, very well. 1 day passed, 2 days passed. Eventually it became known that Muhammad Ali is not a student anymore. He's become a scholar. He's learned so many things. People in town began to say, if you have any question, go to this young man named Muhammad Ali. He sits by the river. He can answer your questions. They went. One person came. 2 people came. Many people began to come. There began to be a rush. He was astonished. One day his students, his classmates, his friends who had gone from Tirmidh to the Hawza, they're sitting in class and they had an experience. They come back to town. When they come back to town, they say they go to the river because they have a question. They see their friend Muhammad Ali. They say, Muhammad Ali, what are you doing here? He said, this is where I sit. I learn from here. I study. Some people come ask questions. I answer. He says, do you know what happened? His friend said. So what happened? He said, we went to the Hawza and we had a big problem that we were facing in class we didn't know the answer to. We asked our teacher. Our teacher said, go to Tirmidh. In Tirmidh, there's a young man who sits by the river. Go ask him. He answers people's questions. Go. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. So your teacher told you to come here to ask me? I said, yes. The news has reached the Hawza. He said, wow. He said, I don't see myself as some big deal, no. They asked the question, he answered the question. But that day he began to cry in his loneliness when people had gone away, when there was no one there. When the elderly man who was his teacher came, he stopped him that day. He said, I need you to answer something for me. He said, what is it? He said, today my classmates, my friends, my colleagues came from the Hawza, and they came for what reason? They came to ask me a question because their teacher told them that I'm the one who can answer their question. I said, very well. Allah has bestowed you with knowledge. He said, no, this knowledge came from you. And you came in my life when I came to sit by this river. Tell me who you are, O old man. He said, it's better if you don't know. He says, tell me, I insist, tell me. He says, just know this. Whoever I am and whyever I am here is because of your mother's du'as. He says, who are you? He says, I am Khidr, the teacher of Musa. Your mother prayed that you would have a teacher and I came in that form. But now that you know who I am, I'm going away. I won't be here with you. He said, then how will I see you? How will I meet you? How will I learn from you? He says, just do good deeds for your mother and you will see the mercy come in your life. The rahmah will come in your life. These are not to be taken lightly. These are instances that change our lives. Manazil al-akhirah, Sheikh Abbas Qummi, Sahib Mafatihul Jinan. Sheikh Abbas Qummi in Manazil al-akhirah, the final stages, the last stages, Manazil al-akhirah. He writes an incident. This is during the fifth Imam's time, the fifth Imam, about 100 years after the Holy Prophet. What happens? During that moment in time, we're told in the riwayat, there's a qafila, a caravan. At that time, people were travelers. There were Muslims, non-Muslims, there were different people in this qafila, and they would travel all day and they would stop in the middle of the night to rest. And then they would get up in the day and then they would travel again. So they got to a town. When they got to the town, there was this pious young man who was part of the qafila, part of the caravan. He asked, where's the qabristan for the mu'mineen? Where's the graveyard? They pointed him to the graveyard. When they pointed him to the graveyard, he went to the graveyard and he recited there, the salam on the inhabitants of the grave, the Ahl la ilaha and all this. He recited that. Then he recited istighfar on behalf of the people who are there in the cemetery. A highly recommended thing on Thursday nights and otherwise to do istighfar for your loved ones. Forgiveness for your loved ones. 110 times he did astaghfirullah rabbi wa atubu ilay on behalf of the people who are buried. He was someone who recited Salatul Layl, a very pious person. Do you know what happened? He went to sleep that night and he saw something. Shaykh Abbas Qummi, Sahib Mafatihul Jinan in Manazil al-Akhirah. In this narration, he saw something, just during the fifth Imam's time. What did he see? He saw a scene in his dream that he's in the cemetery, and in the cemetery, everyone is in their kafan, their shroud, up till their neck. And they are walking around the cemetery and they're running around the cemetery. Why are they running around the cemetery? They are looking for things. And each person is looking for what? According to the narration, a rose. They're trying to get a rose. Why? Because they're in a state of unease. And that rose brings them ease. Imagine you're waiting for someone, imagine you're looking for a gift and you don't have anything, and this rose comes to you as a gift. It opens up your heart. You feel a sense of comfort. It's like a fresh wind, a breeze blowing. So they were all trying to get these. This pious man said, I saw everyone running around the cemetery trying to get a rose. And then I saw one person who's just standing there like this. He wasn't moving. He was just standing there, relaxed. I went to him because he was stopped. Everyone else was running. And I went to him and I asked, what's going on here? Can you please explain? He said, these people are trying to get a rose with their name on it. This rose is symbolic of a good deed they've done or a relative of theirs has done for them. And it would have their name on it and they'll know it's theirs. They're trying to get one. He said, you're not worried? You're not concerned? Why aren't you running around like everyone else? You're just standing here very comfortably, relaxed. What's going on? He said, no, I have plenty. I have a surplus. He said, look into this grave. He looked into the grave. He saw it was filled to the brim. All roses. He said, those are all yours? He said, they're all mine. They have my name on it. Look. He said, very well. What has caused you to have this mercy in your life that none of these other people in the cemetery have? He said, to get the answer to this, you'll have to ask my son, who's alive. And he said, where is he? He said, he's at this location in the town. Remember, he's spending the night. They're in travel and they've stopped in a town. And he recited the dua at the qabristan, and now he had gone to sleep at night, and he saw this scene. He asked, where is your son? He said, he's at this location in this part of town. Go to this house, you'll find him there. He says, very well. He wakes up. As soon as this says, he wakes up. As soon as this happens, he wakes up. He goes to that address that his father had given him. He knocked on the door. He says, Salamu alaikum, wa alaikum as-salam. Is your father here? He says, no, my father is deceased. He's passed away. He says, where is he? Where is he buried? He says he's buried in this cemetery. In what part of this cemetery? In this part of the cemetery. In what grave? In this location. He confirmed that that was the same house, same family. He said, I just want to tell you, I saw a scene in my dream that I want to share with you. He said, it's complete strangers, they don't know each other. He said, what scene did you see? He says, everyone in the cemetery was running trying to find a rose except your father. He said, why? He said, your father had an abundance of them. No one needed to give him anything. The question I came to ask you is, what caused him to have this blessing that no one else had? He said, you have the answer. The son began to cry. He went to his mother. He said, Mother, come listen to this. Listen to this man. He relayed the story. She began to cry. And the son said, Subhanallah, the foresight of my father. Let me explain. He said, my father was the wealthiest businessman in town. He had the most money in town, in the small village that we lived in. And he had a property that was in downtown. It was on the main street, for our words, downtown Lake Mary, downtown Orlando. It was in Billionaires Row in New York. That example. Mayfair in London, that example. It was in downtown, best address you can get. And while he was alive, we said, give this to us, and then we'll build a business and we'll flourish, and we'll be the richest people on top of the richest people in town. They're already rich. He said, there were a few things that my father did, and this is one of them that I wanted to share with you. There's some more that I'll try to share. He said, my father made the decision that while he's alive, he said, I'm not going to give you this property. They said, Baba, why? What's going on? What are you going to do with it? He said, while I'm alive, I want this turned into a masjid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And an orphanage to look after orphans. A house of God where people are taken care of. We were very upset. We said, Father, what are you doing? This is a travesty. He said, no, I know, and I want to make sure my funds are not misused after I die. He said, that sadaqah jariyah while he was alive is paying off dividends in the akhirah. He said, what else? That was one level. What else? What else? He says, this is something my father never told anyone except the immediate family. He didn't want anyone to know. My father had two relatives who were fighting one another. The father was very wealthy, right? So people often, they don't fight with the wealthy relatives. That often doesn't happen. Or the wealthy guy in town, I should say. They fight with people in their own system. The only time wealthy people fight is amongst themselves. If you want to know about this, you'll see Bill Ackman and Carl Icahn. I don't have time to discuss this. But when these billionaires were fighting, what happened as a result of that? But typically, if you're someone who's not the wealthiest person in town, you often don't pick a battle with the wealthiest person in town. Lawsuits, other issues may arise. So what happened? He had two relatives. The father who was buried, he had two relatives who were fighting amongst one another. He went to them. The son is saying, my father went, he took one of the brothers, he went to them, he said, listen, I know you're not talking to your other brother. I know you're fighting amongst each other. But look, he's always said good things about you to me. He said, really? He said that? He said good things about me to you? He said, always. He said, why not reconcile? You know Silatul Rahim in Islam, you know how important it is? You know it cuts off your life? By the way, if you connect this with modern science and medical sociology, Silatul Rahim extends someone's life. Qatar Rahim, to cut off the womb relative, cuts your life off. The length of your life. So if you don't do it for others, at least do it for yourself. He said, my father told this to one of the brothers. Then he went to the other one and he said, why don't you reconcile? You know Silatul Rahim, you know the issues. Why don't you speak to him? He said, no, I have a problem with him. He said, he's always spoken good to me about you. He said, really? I didn't know that, really. He brought them two together and he said, listen, I don't want anyone to know that I'm the cause of this reconciliation. I'm not the reason. You did this yourselves. He says, this work that he did in his life to bring two brothers together, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala endowed him in the hereafter for it. The person who is in the ability to bring people together should never lose that opportunity for this dunya and for the hereafter. Because it will pay tremendous dividends.
My dear brothers and sisters, my time is up. Remember your loved ones while they're alive, value them. And when they have passed, never forget them. Because it will help you in the most difficult times. There's a moment in time we're told there was a young boy, a young man who was not very religious. And because he was not very religious, his mother used to tell him just one thing. Sometimes mothers tell their children, do this, do this, do this. They don't listen. She said just one thing. I'm about to die. I'm not going to live very long. But just remember one thing. My wasiyah. Whenever you see the flag of Hussein, whenever you see the zikr of Hussein, whenever you see anything related to Imam Hussein, stop and say your salams to the Imam. That's it. So he said, I made it a habit in my life, the young man said. I was not the most religious person, he says, but I made it a habit in my life that as long as I saw the alam or the flag or anything that was connected to Imam Hussein, I would stop and give my salams to the Imam. This same young man tragically died in an accident. When he died in an accident tragically, his friend saw in a dream that night that he saw a scene that there is a desert and his friend who has died was not practicing, he was being dragged in the desert. And Malakul Maut, as we would call him, the angel of death was taking him. When the angel of death was taking him, he saw a tent in the middle of the desert, and on top of it was a flag. And it said, Ya Hussein on it. His friend sees in the dream, he says, I told the angel, stop, can you please give me 2 minutes that I can just stop and say my salams and my salutations to this flag of my Imam. He said, we typically don't. He said, but fair, we'll grant this to you. They released him for a moment. He said, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. At that moment, his friend says, as soon as he said this, from the tent emerged Sayyid al-Shuhada himself. When Sayyid al-Shuhada came out, he said, the Imam that I had been calling my whole life, I saw him in front of my eyes, or his friend saw him. He said, give me your book of deeds. He had his book of deeds in his hand. He became ashamed. He said, Yabna Rasulullah, my deeds are not good. He began to cry. He said, again, the Imam said, give me your deeds. He gave him the book, the Imam looked at it, and he did a dua. Allahumma ghfirhu bihaqq Hussein ibn Ali. Oh Allah, forgive him for the sake of Hussein ibn Ali. He closed the book, gave it back to him. When he gave the book back, he gave it back to the angels. The angels looked at it, all of his deeds that were bad had been eliminated. They took him in a different direction. This is the karam of Hussein ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib. A final moment. 2 words of Masaib. This is the Isal al-Sawab of 2 dearly departed individuals. There's a moment we're told that the 6th Imam is asked, he said, what is the greatest ornament of life? The Imam said, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you a child, in particular the narration says, if He gives you a son and you see this son raised in front of your eyes and he is a zina, an ornament for your eyes, and people look at him and they say, what wonderful child, what wonderful parents. That's the greatest gift, ornament Allah has given in this dunya. He said, what's the biggest musibah? He says, the biggest musibah is if Allah takes the same child away from your eyes in this life while you're alive. That's the biggest test for a parent. There's nothing bigger. There's a moment in time on the 10th of Muharram where Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, he is bidding his son Ali Akbar farewell. Ali Akbar's masaib are something that we limit on one day, but Ali Akbar's masaib are not something that are for the light-hearted. Fatima al-Zahra would cry when she would hear the masaib even after. There are numerous narrations of Mullah Saleh Mazandarani and others. Thursday night, Fatima al-Zahra visits the shrine of Hussein ibn Ali. And that moment where Ali Akbar is going towards the battlefield, and Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, he raises his hands, he says, Allahumma shad ala ha'ula'i al-qawm. He says, oh Allah, bear witness over this nation. Why? Because I am sending you the one who is in khalqan wa khuliqan wa mantiqa, in the way he walks, in the way he talks, and in every aspect. He is the replica of your messenger, Rasulullah. Ali Akbar said, my father, why are you following me? He says, Ali, if you had a son like you would know what's going through my heart. Do you know what happened? Ajrukum ala Allah. I will not tell you the whole narration, but we're told when Imam al-Hussein got to the body of Ali al-Akbar, one narration that is not recited extensively, he saw Ali Akbar, and one of the first things that he did when he saw his son, he took his cheek and he put it on the cheek of Ali Akbar, and he said, oh, my son Ali Akbar, وَعَلَى الدُّنْيَا بَعْدَكَ الْعَفَا. Oh my son, after you there is dust on this world. Ajrukum ala Allah. Allah knows how that father saw that this was his son Ali Akbar. But I want to give one more narration. Azadaro ek marhala aaya ke Sham ke bazaar mein jab no ke sina par tamam shuhada ke sar the, ek औरत देख रही थी, एक खातून देख रही थी, एक नौ के सिना पर एक सर था और बहुत जम के देख रही थी. उम्मे लैला को नजर आया, उम्मे लैला आई और एक जुमला कहा कि ए खातून, तू इस चेहरे को क्यों देख रही है? मैं इस चेहरे को इसलिए देख रही हूं. जवाब आया कि ये इतना खूबसूरत जवान है, मैं एक दुआ कर रही हूं कि इसकी मां जिंदा न हो, जो हमें 14वीं का चांद लगे उसकी मां के नजर में कैसे होगा. मैं लैला का दिल टूटा, काहे बीबी न कहो, मेरा लख्ते जिगर अली अकबर इब्ने हुसैन इब्ने अली على لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. Ya Allah, we ask you to bless this holy gathering. Ya Allah, all those who have Marhumeen, forgive their Marhumeen in this night. Ya Allah, allow us to give a gift to our Marhumeen in this night. Ya Allah, forgive all of those who have no one to ask for dua on their behalf. Ya Allah, anyone who's suffering from any illness, grant them shifa from that illness. Ya Allah, anyone who's having a financially difficulty, by Aliyuna Akbar, grant their increase in their sustenance. Ya Allah, it's very difficult to deal with the loss of a loved one. For are those who are the ones who are mourning for their loved ones, whether it's the Haji family or the Kaki family. Ya Allah, grant them strength, and Ya Allah, remove any sins from their Nama A'mal, and Ya Allah, increase the status of their loved ones in the Akhirah, and allow them to be in the shadow of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Ya Allah, hasten the reappearance of Imam Sahib al-Aswa Zaman, and allow us to be amongst his companions when he returns. If you could please recite a Fatiha for the dearly departed Asghar Haji and Muhammad Fida Hussain Kaki, and for your Marhumeen. Al-Fatiha ma'as salawat.
Ziyarat.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alayka ya warisa Adam sifatillah. Assalamu alayka ya warisa Nuhin nabiyillah. Assalamu alayka ya warisa Ibrahim khalilillah. Assalamu alayka ya warisa Musa kalimillah. Assalamu alayka ya warisa Isa ruhillah. Assalamu alayka ya warisa Muhammadin habibillah. Assalamu alayka ya warisa Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam. Assalamu alayka ya ibn Muhammad al-Mustafa. Assalamu alayka ya ibn Ali al-Murtaza. Assalamu alayka ya ibn Fatima al-Zahra. Assalamu alayka ya ibn Khadijah al-Kubra. Assalamu alayka ya Thar Allah wa ibn Thari wal-Witr al-Mawtur. أشهد أنك قد أقمت الصلاة وآتيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر وأطعت الله ورسوله حتى أتاك اليقين فلعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرزيت به. يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله أشهد أنك كنت نورا في الإسلام الشامخة والأرهام المطهرة، لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها ولم تلبسك من مدلهمات ثيابها. وأشهد أنك من دعائم الدين وأركان المؤمنين. وأشهد أن الإمام البر التقي الرزي الزكي الهادي المهدي. وأشهد أن الأئمة من ولدك كلمة التقوى وأعلام الهدى والأروة الوثقى والهجة على أهل الدنيا. وأشهد الله وملائكته وأنبياءه ورسله أني بكم مؤمن وبيا بكم موقن بشرائع ديني وخواتم أملي، وقلبي لقلبكم سلم وأمري لأمركم متبع. صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرحامكم وعلى أجسادكم وعلى أجسامكم وعلى شاهدكم وعلى غائبكم وعلى ظاهركم وعلى باطنكم. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله، السلام عليك يا ابن نبي الله، السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا ابن الحسين الشهيد، السلام عليك أيها الشهيد، السلام عليك أيها المظلوم وابن المظلوم. لعن الله أمة قتلتك، ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك، ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرزيت به. السلام عليك يا ولي الله وابن ولي، لقد أزمت المصيبة وجلت. السلام عليك يا أولياء الله وهباء، السلام عليك يا أصفياء الله ووداء، السلام عليكم يا أنصار دين الله، السلام عليكم يا أنصار رسول الله، السلام عليكم يا أنصار أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليكم يا أنصار فاطمة سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي محمد الحسن بن علي ولي الناس، السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي عبد الله، بأبي أنتم وأمي تبتم وتابت الأرض التي فيها دفنتم وفزتم فوزا عظيما، فيا ليتني كنت معكم فأفوز معكم. السلام عليك يا أبا الفضل عباس بن أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا ابن سيد الوسيين، السلام عليك يا ابن أول القوم إسلاما وأقدمهم إيمانا وأكملهم بدين الله وأهوتهم على الإسلام. أشهد لقد نصحت لله ولرسوله ولأخيك فنعم الأخ المواسي. فلعن الله أمة قتلتك، ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك، ولعن الله أمة استحلت منك المهارم وانتهكت حرمة الإسلام. فنعم الصابر المجاهد المهامي الناس ولقد دافي عن أخيه المجيب إلى طاعة ربه الراغب فيما زيد فيه غير من ثواب الجزيل والثناء الجميل، والحقك الله بدرجة آبائك في جنات النعيم. السلام عليك يا شمس الشموس ونيس النفوس، أيها المدفون بأرض توس، الرضا المرتضى رازم القدر والقضاء، السلطان أبا الحسن علي بن موسى الرضا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا مولاي يا صاحب الزمان، السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن، السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان، السلام عليك إمام الإنس والجان، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرزك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا.